Hello, good day to all of you. I hope you are doing well today. By the way, my name is Vanessa M. Abutal, and just a little information about me. I am 29 years old. I live in Niloan, Cebu. I am married to my husband since last year, which makes it almost a year, and I am into music. I also love watching horror movies. Aside from that, I love eating rice very much. So without further ado, let me get you through with my presentation today. My topic is the chapter 5, which is all about the form, function correlations, situated meanings, and figured worlds. These three are the tasks of the discourse analysis. But before discussing them to you, let me present to you first the outline so we can always be guided to the subtopics that we are going to be talking about later on. So the first one is the overview of the discourse analysis. This is actually the primary reason why we are here. Why we are analyzing some discourses, right? So the first task is the form function correlation, situated meaning, figured world, and the last subtopic is the frame problem. So let us start. So as an overview of the discourse analysis, let us first define what discourse analysis really is. So I have provided there the definition. It is the process of understanding a text by paying attention to everything that gives meaning to the text. So I have prepared there just a simple graphic illustration showing the process of a discourse. We have there the speaker, the text, the listener, and I'm pretty sure that we are all aware of the roles of the speaker and the listener in a daily conversation or interactions, right? So as for the text there refers to the spoken or the written text. So if someone says or if someone greets you with hi and then you answered with hello, that is already a text. Or if someone sends you a letter or just a simple letter, then the content or the message of the letter is already a text. So again, anything that is written or spoken is considered to be a text. Now there is an example there. I am going to read it to you. I can't play basketball today. I haven't got any shoes. Now, this sentence certainly does not mean that the teenager has no shoes whatsoever in the closet. The pattern of the sentence shows that the shoes means athletic shoes. He can't play basketball because he doesn't have a pair of athletic shoes. Now, how did we come up with that kind of interpretation? Now take note that the athletic shoes is clearly not in the sentence. But how did we come up with that kind of interpretation that the shoes there means the athletic shoes? Now, that's all because of discourse analysis, right? So we are able to grasp its token meaning based on the situation, the grammatical unit, the background, most especially the situation, and also the clues that we used in analyzing the text, right? So that's how the discourse analysis works. Again, discourse analysis is anything that gives meaning to the text. So it involves the grammatical unit, the situation, and also the gestures. Just by pointing at something or someone, so that includes in analyzing the discourse analysis. Now, just like what I've told you earlier, that there are three tasks of discourse analysis, and one of which is the form function correlation, or James Paul G actually prefer calling it by utterance type meaning task. So this is the first task. There are two definitions of the utterance type meaning task. The first is it deals with the general range of possible meanings. We call it meaning range that grammatical units can have. Grammatical units include morphemes, words, clauses, sentences, and phrases as well. We do understand that These grammatical units do not just acquire one meaning or contextuality. Actually, we do not stick to the only one possible meaning, but a multiple sets or range of meaning. So for example, the word cat has to do with felines. Felines there refers to animals that belong to the cat family. The contextuality of a cat doesn't only involve to a small domestic cat, that some people take care of at home, just like me. I do have a cat, but rather it has a broader meaning that we need to recognize. Failure to recognize this meaning range can sometimes lead to confusion to the person accepting the text or the information. The second definition, it involves the study of correlations between form and function in language. Form means the arrangement of morphemes, just like what I've told you earlier, means the arrangement of morphemes and words into larger units of group, clauses, and finally, sentences. Function means meaning or the communicative purpose a form carries out. Now, function in language has a lot of communicative purposes based on form. It can either be assertive or asserted or unasserted, a positive claim or an affirmation. It can also be negation, or it can also be a um, interrogative, a command, or request. There are a lot of communicative purposes. Now, what is basically the purpose of that claim is up to the person interpreting the discourse. Now, let's take a look at the first example. Let me read it to you. Though the Whig and Tory parties were both narrowly confined to the privileged classes, they represented different factions and tendencies. So in order to analyze the claim or the statement, we need to define the terms first. The Whig and Tory parties, who or what are they? Are these names? Are these names of groups? We don't know. So that's why we need to analyze first the background so we can interpret fully what is being meant by the discourse. So again, let us first define what or who Whig and Tory parties are. So the Whig and Tory parties are actually the two major political parties in England, particularly in the 18th century. It all started when James II, if I'm not mistaken, the younger son of then King Charles I, was deposed of the throne or of the crown or of the throne over religious matters or over religious tolerance, because it was being mentioned that James II was the last monarch of England, which triggered the political or the opposing political parties to rebel against him being on the throne. So the Whig Party connoted rebellion and was applied to those people who are against James II to be on the throne. This word or this term was applied to those who claimed the power of, excluding James II to the throne or from the throne, while Tory party was applied to those people who supported James II, despite of his Roman Catholic faith. Just like in the Philippines, right? We have two major political parties. So, yes, two political parties that are expected to leave the administration and also the opposition for the upcoming 2022 Philippine general elections. So that's PDP Laban, if I'm not mistaken. PDP Laban stands for Partido Demokratiko Pilipino, Lakas ng Bayan, and also the Liberal Party. So PDP Laban is our country's current ruling party since 2016 because of our current president Rodrigo Duterte being the national chairman. And also the Liberal Party is the current political party of our vice president Leni Robredo and is still the primary opposing political party of the Philippines, right? By the way, the our our two political parties are really aiming to lead the country, and I just hope that a lot of us, or mostly or most of the Filipinos, will really vote wisely. Anyway, going back to this kind of sentence, let me read it to you again. Though the Whig and Tory parties were both narrowly confined to the privileged classes, they represented different factions and tendencies. This sentence is made up of two clauses, the independent clause and the dependent clause. The highlighted clause is the independent clause. This one, they represent different factions and tendencies, while the dependent clause is the italicized claim or statement, which is, though the Whig and Tory parties were both narrowly confined to the privileged cases. These clauses or these statements speak about the form, you know, these clauses or the arrangement of words into larger units of clauses or a group of words into finally being a sentence. So this is what makes it a form. How about the function? The independent clause here, which is they represented different factions and tendencies, this independent clause expresses assertion or a claim, a strong claim, or a strong positive claim. The dependent clause expresses the function of information that is not asserted, or but rather a assumed or taken for granted. So that is the function. So in this sentence, there are two functions, the asserted one and the unasserted or not asserted. So as what we can notice, the two clauses weigh differently, right? So the independent clause weigh more than the dependent clause, of course, because that can't stand alone in the statement. So the independent clause has to weigh more, more than the dependent clause. However, many times or most of the times, the information in the sentence alone isn't sufficient, isn't enough. So that is, knowing the form function correlation or the utterance type meaning task isn't enough to know what someone is saying on a particular situation. So let's try to have the second example. Let me read it to you. He is the vice president of the student body. So by analyzing the form, we can say that, of course, the highlighted pronoun, which is he, is the subject, and the vice president is the subjective complement, and the student body is the object of the preposition. So that makes up the form. Those things actually speak about the form, right? The grammatical unit, and also the morphemes or the words into the larger units of groups that makes it a sentence, right? So that is actually the form. However, let's take a look at the highlighted word pronoun, which is the he, right? So he there, without knowing to whom the pronoun he is referring to, we cannot know whether the sentence or the statement is true or false, right? So that makes the information provided ambiguous. It is not clear. It's not there. Who is who? Which is which? Right? Although the form and function are there, they are already being analyzed. Like the form, the function. What is the function of this statement or this claim? This is just like a declarative statement. Assertive. He is the vice president of the student body. Although the form and the function are analyzed, the validity is still an issue, right? So we need to widen our scope. We need to know more about the situation, right? So in that case, if someone says he is the vice president of the student body while pointing at someone, that is valid, right? Again, so if someone says he is the vice president of the student body while pointing at someone, that is already valid because we are accepting the gesture. We are also analyzing the gesture of the person or of the speaker, right? So Now, understanding the situation is already outside the form function correlation or the utterance type meaning task. Situation or understanding or analyzing the situation is also another task. So that is our second task. So the second task is the situated meaning task, which is, or, the author prefer calling it with utterance token meaning. Utterance token meaning deals with the highly specific meanings that words and phrases take on in actual context. It also involves the study of correlation between the form and function in language at the level of utterance token meanings. So earlier we had utterance type meaning task. Right now, the situated meaning task is also called the utterance token meaning. Essentially, this task involves discovering the situation-specific or situated meanings of forms used in specific contexts of use. The situated meaning task talks about the language used in a given situation, with the help of course, the utterance type meaning task or the form function correlation. So situated meaning task and the utterance or form function correlation task are involved with each other, right? But I have provided there sets of examples. So the first set is we are going to be talking about the word coffee. Now, take note of the possible meaning range of the word coffee. The same word is being used in every sentence, but each of them means differently. Okay, let's have the first example in set A. Let me read it to you. The coffee spilled. Go get a mop. In this context, coffee means a brown liquid. A brown liquid that is spilled to the ground or to the floor. That's why someone is asked to go get a mop. The next example, the coffee spilled. The coffee spilled. Go get a broom. In this context, coffee here means grains of a certain type or a certain sort, or more like powder, more like some powder. These powder or grains of certain sorts are spilled to the ground. So that's why someone is asked to clean it up by using the broom and not a map or not a mop, right? The third sentence, the coffee spilled, stack it again. In this context, the coffee here means like a container. That's why someone is asked to pile it up again. The coffee, the container, the coffee spilled. So someone is asked to, okay, pile it up again. You have to pile it up again or stack it again. Okay, so let's have another set of examples. So in set B, in a situation where we say something like, oh, the world's big cats are all endangered. So the cat there means big animals like lions, tigers, jaguars, etc. Right? On the other hand, in situations where we are discussing breakable decorative objects in our living room or at home, we say something like, the cat broke. The cat there means a statue or a figurine that is being broken. So it is not literally the cat. The literal meaning of cat is that of a small domestic pet, right? But if we say something like the cat broke, oh no, the cat broke. So the cat there is not the literal meaning of the cat. The cat here, in this situation, it means like a figurine or a statue of a cat that is broken. Okay, and in set C, or in the example, another example, this is different. This is totally different to that of the first two sets of examples. But okay, so let's try. There is this one simple sentence. Karen went to the bank today. So by just stating this kind of sentence or statement, this sentence can have two meaning based on the utterance token task or the situated meaning task. So in other words, this statement, Karen went to the bank today, can have two meanings. The first meaning is that when someone says Karen went to the bank today, bank there can or may mean any bank in the Philippines, like BPI, DBP, China Bank, BDO, PNB, and a lot more. The bank there may mean any bank in the Philippines. However, in sentence number 2, bank there may also mean like a riverbank, a river in the Philippines. Karen went to the bank today. So bank there can also mean the riverbank. So it depends on the situation. And also, it also involves the form function correlation, right? The form function correlation and also the utterance type meaning has something to do with the situated meaning task. If you do not know the meaning range of a certain word or term, then you couldn't acquire the correct interpretation that is based on the situation given, right? The next task of discourse analysis is the figured world. Now, there are two definitions. Figured world are theories and stories that we humans use to understand and deal with the world. Figured world is also known as folk theories, mental models, cultural models, discourse models, etc. Now, I had read another reference book that, instead of defining the term or instead of figured world, cultural models or cultural model is being used as a term. But any other way, figured world and cultural models are of the same definition. Those are theories and stories in our minds or in our heads, right? In understanding, and we humans used to understand and deal with the world. All right, so let's have this. For example, can we call the Pope a bachelor? Of course not. We cannot. We should not call the Pope a bachelor, right? Though the Pope is a bachelor, or the Pope is an unmarried man, and bachelor is as word as defined as the unmarried man, we are reluctant to call the Pope a bachelor. Why? Because we do not use words just based on their definitions, but rather we use words based on stories. Typical, stories, theories are models in our minds about what is normal or typical. It is typical in our world that men marry women. A man who is somewhat past the typical age when people marry, we call a bachelor, assuming he is open to marriage but has either chosen to wait or has not found the right person. The Pope is both past the normal age for marriage and has vowed never to marry. He just does not fit the typical story in our heads. What is taken to be normal or typical varies by the context and by people's social and cultural group. What counts as a typical story for other people may not be a typical story for you or for me, right? Now, let's take a look at this example here on the next slide or presentation. Suppose that you have a 2-year-old child. How would you react if you are confronted by your 2-year-old child who angrily refuses to go to bed? Will you pacify your child, or will you take disciplinary action, to his or her behavior? So which is which? Again, will you pacify your child, or will you take disciplinary action because you believe that his behavior is not good or is not right for his age? What are you going to do? Now, some people or some parents would take the child's behavior as a sign of growth towards autonomy or independence because they accept a typical story like this. Children are born dependent on their parents and then grow towards individual autonomy. They act out, demanding independence when they may not be ready for it, but this is still a sign of development and growth, right? So they take this child's behavior a positive behavior because they believe that the child is learning something to be or learning to be independent. So that's a positive behavior for them. That's according to some parents. And other parents as well take the behavior as a sign of child's willfulness or stubbornness because they accept a typical story like this. Children are born selfish and need to be taught to think of others and collaborate with the family rather than demand their own way. Now, these parents think that being demanding is a sign of selfishness. No, being demanding is a sign of selfishness of the child. And so the child needs to learn to be cooperative with the people around him or her, right? These parents who believe that being too demanding is a sign of selfishness would normally say, like, to their 2-year-old child that dili maging ana, dapat matulog jud ka. Saan na rasa? So it's like taming the child instead of, uy, nakatulog na bibi. Sige na, matulog na ta. Instead of doing like that, right? Some parents are like that. Some parents are like that. I think I'm not yet a mother, pero if given the blessing to be a mother sooner or later, I think I would be that kind of parent. I would be that kind of mother. Akong ingon akong anak, dapat matulog jud ka ingon aning orasa. Dili kay mo ingon nga, sige na bibi, matulog na ta. It's 2 p.m. already, so it is time for you to go to bed, right? Now, it is perhaps not surprising that this typical parent or typical story is more common among working class families, like me, where mutual support among the family and friends is really important. The first typical story, katong moingon lang, sige na, kanang, the parents who would pacify the children or his or her child, that first typical story is more common among middle and upper middle class families with many financial resources. Makabantay mo. Right? Itong mga dato, like middle class, normally or usually they would pacify their children or their kids and say, so we would pacify their children and say, oy, kanang matulog na ta. So that's how those families in the middle and upper middle class would react, right? But kita nga nara sa working class families, of course, we have to discipline our kids, right? Okay. But these parents who are actually looking forward to their children to go more independently, it's not wrong. Actually, it's not right. It's not wrong and it's not right, right? I mean, such typical stories are actually not wrong or right. They can be right in their situation. So that is their typical story, the typical story in their heads. So that makes it more meaningful to them. So accepting or acceptable, that typical story is more acceptable to them because of the way they live and because of their cultural group, right? Again, what counts as a typical story may not be the typical story for you, or the typical story of people differs by their social and cultural group or community in the society. Another example is that if you are asked to imagine your home, and you would probably populate your home with things that are, in a quite different way than another person would. So you would probably imagine your family eating together, doing the same thing together. However, another person may view his or her home as a resting place, where he or she could rest, could relax after a day's work, or a place where he can sleep, where he can eat or unwind. That's how he views his home. And it's not wrong to view home like that. It's what he or she believes to be the typical story in his or her head about viewing home, right? So it is his own way of viewing his or her house or home. So there is nothing wrong about it. So next slide is the frame problem. Okay, let me read to you the claim number 1. Many children die in Africa before they are 5 years old because they get infectious diseases like malaria. The interpretation we get is that, or from this text, is that the claim has a narrow context and seems to be exceptional, meaning to say, whether these children belong to the low, middle, or even upper class families, or even in the community they live in, doesn't have the health threats among these people, still, many children die before they even reach the age of 5. So it's not exemptional. It is also stated there that no other life-threatening disease or infectious disease mentioned apart from malaria. Where in claim number 2, let us read, malaria is one of the most severe public health problems worldwide. It is a leading cause of death and disease in many developing countries, where young children and pregnant women are the groups most affected. However, almost all these deaths occur in the non-industrialized world. Health inequality affects not just how people live, but often dictates how and what age they die. So in this context, in the context of claim number 2, it seems to say that so many children in Africa die early, not just because of the infectious disease, which is the malaria, but because of poverty and the economic underdevelopment, right? The claim has this interpretation that if only the country has better healthcare system and better governance, then there wouldn't be any death among these children or these people. So what is the conclusion of this frame problem? So it says here, no matter how much of the context we have considered in offering an interpretation, there is always the possibility of considering other and additional aspects of the context, and these new considerations may change how we interpret the text. We cannot also argue an analysis is valid unless we keep widening the context in which we consider a piece of language until the widening appears to make no difference to our interpretation. So you see, the wider the context is, the more or the better interpretation we can acquire from that text or from that claim. Right? We just have to widen the context. We have to know more about the situation, not just the grammatical unit or the form or form function correlation, not just the gestures, but everything that gives meaning to the text. That includes the gestures, the background, the situation, and also the figured world. We need to think that, right? So that ends my presentation today. I hope you have learned something. And I will be leaving you with this kind of quote by George Eliot. All meanings we know depend on the key of interpretation. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening. And please don't hesitate to ask any questions. Thank you so much. Bye.